Do white people have a culture of their own, or is everything appropriation? The answer is white people is a terrible, terrible term.
And it's one that we
And it's
use.
one that we use. But the fact of the matter is, the concept of white America is one that was created intentionally.
And purposefully and with an agenda. We actually have a whole video on this. Oh God.
So
It's part of a series I did right after Pagan Pride. But let's talk about mayonnaise culture for a second. So, literally, at one point in American history, it was quite common for people who were white skinned to have pride in their nation of origin, their ethnicity, their culture of origin, and there was a lot of people who were proudly Lithuanian American and German American and Irish American and Dutch American and and they were very proudly this. And the people who were in power in the government went, no, no, we need to drum up nationality. We need to drum up this imperialist nationality because we benefit from it. And they literally created American culture and commodified it. They created the idea of, well, no, square dancing in particular. They created and perpetuated using film and television the idea of, American as apple pie, potato salad, barbecues with the man at the grill and the wife bringing out the tray of drinks. And they created magazine ads, and we literally have documentation of presidents and advisory councils that created and shaped this idea of white America in order to drum up American nationality, and nationalism, which is a scary thing, imperialist nationalism. But that's what they wanted to create, was imperialist nationalism. And they did this. First, they made it very, very difficult for you as a culture to pull permits to have things like German American parades and festivals celebrating your culture that was not American. And then they started doing state-funded fairs that drummed up, again, this idea of white nationalism, and American as apple pie. And these state-funded fairs taught things like square dancing, and square dancing was declared the national dance, and you all had to learn it in high school. And they started pushing, it didn't used to be common to say the Pledge of Allegiance every morning, but they decided it was going to be, and they started
case over this. It was fun.
And they really started pushing this idea of white American culture, and it's sterilized and homogenized, and they purposefully made it harder for white Americans to identify with the culture of their origination. You weren't German, you weren't Lithuanian, you weren't Bulgarian or Romanian, you were white. Now, in particular, when you're talking about the African diaspora and the children from Africa, the children of the slaves, the children of people brought over against their will, they don't know their country of origin. Africa's gigantic. It is a giant continent, and it could eat a lot of countries, and it contains many countries, but many descendants of the African slaves, they don't know what country they're from. And trying to sort of reclaim the monolith of African culture, there's a huge variance of cultures in Africa, from, the Damari of Egypt to, the Algerians, and they're all different. They're all different languages, different cultures, different cultural values, and you have these descendants of slaves, they can't reclaim that. They don't know which of that they belong to. And DNA tests are only so helpful when your ancestors were raped a bunch. So black people got stripped of the ability to have that cultural pride and that cultural reclamation. And so they get to have black pride. But white pride is just pride in the color of your skin, as if it's somehow inherently superior.
So there is another layer of this that I want to get into,
Okay.
especially now. There was a time, right as this was happening, that people went from being Lithuanian Americans to being white Americans. And they could still remember Lithuanian food and Lithuanian dances and Lithuanian culture, or their parents could, or their grandparents could, and they could still go listen to the stories. A lot of the people now, white witches in America, essentially, or just white people in general, are going, I want a culture that's mine. And I can do the research and I can do the Ancestry.com work, but that feels like I'm pretending. It feels like I don't own that culture because I didn't grow up with it. I never even knew about
And
it.
it doesn't help that you're
What
going
do
to
I-
encounter tradcraft people or direct lineage people, people who have been in direct lineage from those that won't be welcoming. And I'm sorry about that. The same thing is happening in Germanic polytheism and Celtic polytheism, where someone finds out that they're Germanic and they're like, cool, I'm gonna go practice the religion of my ancestors. And they encounter these people who have unbroken lineage
Or claim they do
or
anyway.
claim they do, and who are like, no, this is ours and you can't have it. Fuck those
Right.
people.
Either-
Fuck those people in particular. Because this gate guarding bullshit has got to stop. We don't want people being proud of being white. You know what comes of people being proud of being white instead of being proud of their culture of origin? White supremacy comes from that. Nazis come from that. And I'm not saying that you're responsible for creating Nazis if you don't welcome every asshat who knocks on your door and demands to join your group. I am saying we want people to have cultural, ethnic pride and celebration that is not just because they feel inherently superior because white America tells them they are superior. Because white America is built on sunshine towns.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Y'all are making this really difficult.
Sorry.
Because I'm about to advocate a position that isn't white supremacist, but someone could really easily misconstrue as being that, which is that I don't see anything intrinsically wrong with the idea of, for example, broke millennial American culture. And if you want to take, okay, let's go the pop culture pagan direction. You want to take creepy internet myths and turn them into the basis of your mythology that you use to practice witchcraft? That actually sounds completely awesome.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. You're saying if you feel disconnected from the culture of your origin,
Then
there
you can,
is a way to build a new culture for
based on where
yourself
you are.
that is not based in white supremacy or Mayo America.
Correct. And it should be instead based in elements of your identity. And if your identity isn't, okay, let's say that you're sort of the American mutt where you're from 7 different ethnic extractions, because that happens. You can look at, you can look to stories of communities coming together. If you want to have that be part of your identity, you can look to, I went to UNC Chapel Hill. There's a whole fucking mythology at that college.
There's also
And you can build off of that as an identity
there's
element if you want
colonial
to.
witchcraft. There's which is inherently blended. One of the questions we got sent was like, how do you practice Southern folk magic without appropriating from hoodoo? And I'm like, okay, well, you look at the European cultures that blended and syncretized and went through a crucible.
Weirdly, Sleepy Hollow did a good job of this.
Yes, they did. That syncretized and blended in the South, and you build something out of that syncretization and blending that doesn't take from African diasporic and First Nations traditions. We have a student that grew up in Louisiana and who practices this really fascinating blend of French colonial and English colonial and Germanic colonial magic that you really only find in New Orleans. And he gets really pissed off at people like Christian Day who are like, well, I have to
everyone gets pissed off at
appropriate.
Christian Day.
I have to appropriate. Well, Christian Day doesn't call it appropriation, but I have the right to this because it is from New Orleans and I'm from New Orleans. And it's like, make up your mind, buddy. Are you from Salem or New Orleans? Because I've heard both. But also, he gets mad because he's like, no, you can. You can. You absolutely can. And it's beautiful and rich and detailed. It just takes work to find it.
So, basically, if you feel connected to where you are rather than where your ancestors came from, and you don't feel connected to that culture, you can find a culture
There
that you
are,
can connect to.
if you want to celebrate the melting pot of diversity in the United States and build that into your magic,
Go
there
for
are
it.
respectful ways of doing that. There are
Yeah.
ways to do that where you don't take. I practice cunning and clevercraft, which is very specifically, Appalachian melting pot. And it's new. Well, no, I mean there were cunning women of Ireland, and there were, but
The way it
the
came
way
together in
it came
America is
together in
pretty
America
unique.
is what I practice, and I practice from one of those melting pot cultures that we're not proud of being white. We're not practicing as our ancestors practiced that we're divorced from. We're practicing something new and unique to the region that's very bound up in the region and what grows there and what it's like living there with the storm nurseries and the lightning bugs and the rhododendron thickets. You can find that in your area. So yeah, that was really helpful. And like, there's absolutely broke millennial witchcraft with emoji craft and
Like,
dollar
this is turning
store
into a thing.
candles, and there's a whole culture coming out of that that isn't based in whiteness or nationalism or your ancestral work.
Yeah.
Looking at a chair and going, same.
Right. So
like that's a fallen chair. Same. That can be.
so
The
hopefully
bees
that
thing
is
that I'm seeing all the
helpful.
bee spells right now with the millennial witches trying to save the bees. That is a new culture and a new system of magic that you can absolutely join. Nobody owns it.